Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Sean, do you have a thought for us today?
Oh, do I ever. I first want to admit that although I have social media, I'm really not good at it. I think Instagram's the only thing I really know and pay attention to. Facebook is complicated.
Yeah.
Apparently so is Twitter. But I did notice that our friend Effie appears to be working really hard at trying to find you a person. And I would argue she's working harder at it than you are. She tweeted something recently about how eligible of bachelors we are, and there was some activity for you specifically.
I know. It got me kind of excited because you're right. Like, I'm not doing a whole lot on my end, and I'm really grateful for anything anyone's able to throw my way. So,
so thank you, Effie and Kyle. You nothing happens by accident, so you might want to think about your strategy or your lack thereof.
I'm thinking I might put my strategy together tomorrow or next week or something.
Yeah, we all know that's not going to happen. So let's just go ahead and jump into this week's What Say You? This comment is coming from Fred. Fred gave us 5 stars and wrote, "My son was diagnosed with FA last year. We'll often put on the podcast and just listen around the house on the weekend or in the evenings. Every time we listen to an episode, it is a huge encouragement to keep pressing ahead." Fred, we're grateful that you found the podcast, and of course, we're grateful that you find a little bit of encouragement in our banter and rambling. And I just want to say, every time you and someone like you downloads an episode, we're encouraged to keep pressing ahead ourselves. So thank you for listening, and thank you for the 5 stars and taking the moment to write a review. It's like a circular thing, right? Someone listens, so we record. We record, and someone listens. So thank you, Fred.
I love that Fred mentions those kind of ordinary moments around the house, in the evenings, on the weekends, and those ordinary moments of peace and joy, maybe with your family, are sometimes what life's all about. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of that in some way for Fred and his family. Our guest today is someone who's been in the rare disease community for a long time and does really incredible work at Catalyst Pharmaceuticals. Enjoy our conversation with Amy Grover. Amy Grover, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be with 2 rock stars of rare. So thank you so much I'm just giddy, I guess. So thank you so much for having me.
Day made already. Like when somebody actually is excited to be on here, I feel like some people are like, oh, shoot, Sunday morning, what?
No, all good. I'm Amy, in the presence of rare royalty for sure.
Thank you.
So, Amy, before we get into a few questions about your career in rare, we want to know a little about you. What's life for you like now? Family life? Anything you love to do outside of work?
I would say one word to describe my life is chaos. So I live in Southern California. I've been here for, almost 19 years, which is crazy. So grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area. So I feel like we have a lot of connections, which is great.
Yeah.
I have 4 children, 2 boys, ages 24 and 25 and 24. It's hard to keep track. And 2 girls that are 22 and 21. So they're all either recently graduated college or they are in college right now. So, and then outside of work, unfortunately, our football season's over. I'm a huge 49er fan and trying to get back out there, now that we can start getting back out there and pick up my golf game again because it's really rusty.
Oh, nice. Good.
Where in Southern California are you?
So I am in the Laguna Beach area, which is South Orange County. Yeah. So it's like halfway between LA and San Diego.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're still a Niner fan. You have many other options down there.
Yeah. Well, now it's going to be tough because my husband's still kind of a Rams fan. But we are fans since 1981. So huge fans, season tickets. In fact, my sister still has those season passes for Levi Stadium.
I knew I wanted to be your friend for something.
Likewise.
That's terrible.
Amy, since you're on the West Coast and you work with a lot of people on the East Coast, just because that's where a lot of the action is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you say is the main difference between people on the West Coast and people on the East Coast?
Oh, gosh. How do I try not to offend people. No, I'm kidding. West Coast, I think, is a little bit more relaxed than the East Coast. I think the difference is the East is so connected. I feel like the West is completely spread apart. And in fact, I'm learning a little bit more now. My daughter is studying nursing at the UMass Boston right now. So she's in Boston, having her first winter there as a California girl. And I was mentioning to somebody the other day that I thought, okay, I think I'll be in New York City at such and such time. I think I'll fly her down. And they said, flyer, you take the train. And it's it's a whole new world going, wait a minute, a train, you take the train. So, and they were kind of taken aback. And I think 3 people, when I mentioned that from the East Coast, said, no, you don't fly her, you take the train. So learning about how connected that the East Coast is for sure than the West Coast.
Yeah.
You make a good point with the train. I've done the train here from Sacramento to Bakersfield to see family. And I've never done the train on the East Coast. But from what I gather, 2 completely different lifestyles in a sense. Like people commute on the train out there.
They don't here.
I didn't pick up the commuter vibe, when I did the train out here.
Right, absolutely. One of these days, I want to take the train from here to San Diego because I heard it's a beautiful trip all along the water. So that's on my bucket list one of these days to do that.
Nice. Amy, you worked for Global Genes for so long, and I want to ask you a few questions about Global Genes just because it kind of sets up, I don't want to say dichotomy, but things are different in the nonprofit world as they are in the for-profit world, right? And that was kind of one of the things I wanted to get at. So what are some things that you learned while at Global Genes that really help inform what you do now?
Oh, gosh, the list is very long of things that I learned at Global Genes. I think first and foremost, the people that I've met throughout the 10 years I was at Global Genes a lot of them are now family. And it is because this community is just so tight knit and so close to each other. But one of the things that I just love and learned along the way that everyone's going through their difficult time, their difficult journey, but they will drop anything in a heartbeat to help another rare disease patient or caregiver or parent in a second. And so one of my most prominent roles there was to talk to patients and caregivers and leaders of organizations. And they would call me up and say, okay, just started this nonprofit 3 months ago. What do I do? And this is kind of where we want to focus. I'd pick up the phone and reach out to 4 or 5 people that have been there and done that. And without hesitation, yes, send them my way. I would be happy to help them. And then we created this kind of network of mentors that helped other patients. And there was no qualms. They absolutely would step up to the plate to help any other person that's kind of starting out in this journey. So that was just fantastic, because you all know these stories that are just, heartbreaking, of the struggles that these parents and patients and caregivers go through. And for them to immediately turn around and say, I will do anything I can to help, is just absolutely incredible.
Now you are in patient engagement at Catalyst Pharmaceuticals. And first of all, tell us a little bit about Catalyst. What do you guys do, and what are you excited about there?
First of all, Catalyst is a very small pharmaceutical company. And so we're just kind of a tiny group of people, which led to a great fit for me, because, Global Genes was kind of a small group wearing many hats. And so it seemed like a good, fit for me. But Catalyst Pharmaceuticals right now has a treatment for Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, and or also known as LEMS. But it's a ultra rare disease. We think that there's only about 3,000 patients affected by LEMS in the United States. So it's ultra rare. And basically, it's a neuromuscular disorder that normally typically starts with weakness in the legs, and it could be debilitating and move up, and sometimes in the arms and the shoulders. And it's very similar to myasthenia gravis, if you haven't heard of myasthenia gravis, and which 30% of LEMS patients are normally misdiagnosed with myasthenia gravis first, because it's more well known. So it's just a really, really small community.
Were you on the team when that treatment came out?
I joined Catalyst 3 weeks before our approval.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was kind of thrown in the pool and said, sink or swim.
Yeah.
So, it was a really amazing time just to watch that unfold and how that process works. But I worked on the nonprofit side with Global Genes with the LEMS community for about 2 years. So I got to see kind of how that community developed and grew and created programs and things like that to help the LEMS community. So it was a great transition to kind of come to the other side, but it was a daunting transition for sure. When it comes to advocacy, that was an easy fit. It was a really easy fit. And I'm really blessed to work for a company that my role is a coveted role and it's a respected role. And so I felt like I brought my expertise from Global Genes over to this role. That part of things was a really easy fit, but to learn the pharmaceutical side of things and the drug development process and access and specialty pharmacy, that took a little time for me to kind of get up to speed. But I have a lot of people at Catalyst that are willing to help me out and educate me. And so here I am now. I can't believe it's been 3 years. It's crazy.
So what's your title at Catalyst?
My title, as of January 1st, is Senior Director of Patient Advocacy. So,
congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow. Thank you.
You mentioned that it's a respected position, but the position really hasn't been around for all that long, just in general in the industry. Can you describe what a patient advocacy position does at a pharma company?
In a nutshell, they're the connection between the patients and the patient community and the company. In my 3 years being in pharmaceuticals and talking to my other colleagues from different companies, that role really depends on the company and what they need from that role. So for me, I am that conduit, and we create disease-specific educational materials, but anything that we do is run by the patients and the patient communities first. So we, hold advisory boards. We present things and garner their feedback. Some of the advisory boards are very specific in topics. But the thing that I love about patients and caregivers is they will tell us when we're on the right path and when we're not on the right path. And that's why we, garner their feedback on a continual basis. So part of my job is that conduit. And then part of my job is to, create these tools and resources for the community.
You talked about patient feedback. You're on the right track or you're not. Is that coming through data, Or is it conversations? Or somebody saying, I hate what you're doing. Stop doing that.
Yeah, it's definitely conversations and mainly through the advisory board. So, we'll sit down and last 2 years it's been on Zoom. But we'll sit down around the table and, present the direction we want to go in, or we will present a tool or a material to them and they'll say, yeah, that resonates with me, or I can absolutely use that. Or they'll say, no, that doesn't work for me. Or I don't understand that language. Can you rephrase it? So it's personal conversations that we have, which is important. You have to have that open communication and that open dialogue.
Yeah, it's amazing because nothing in life is black and white. But in this case, you're saying that patients have a strong opinion this way or that way. And I feel like a company could be probing for years to find out like what is going to be best for the patient. But in this case, if you go directly to them, that's what's going to get you there, right?
Right, absolutely. And you can read the symptoms on a piece of paper of a rare disease, but that only tells a very small part of the story. I mean, I always say it tells 10% of the story because there's 90% of other things that go along with rare disease that they're challenged with, right? And you really have to have that open dialogue and that communication to truly understand the journey of a rare disease patient. And that journey is different than mainstream diseases, right? Because there's not a lot of information out there. Sometimes there's not support. We know that 50% of rare diseases don't have a patient support group. So for me, and I take this seriously, I feel that pharmaceutical companies need to do more by patients than beyond just providing a treatment. They need to do more. And that's where we, have developed a disease-specific website that is the first for LEMS. So that patients can get those educational tools and resources, because I used to talk to patients all the time, obviously on the phone at Global Genes. And, how did your doctor kind of tell you about your rare disease? And I said, either we got a pamphlet or they said, I don't know a lot about it, but 99% of the time they go home and use the almighty Google to find out, about their rare disease. So I feel like it's their responsibility to do more by the patients.
And there's a tendency to stick to the legal, the written. And I think the most successful patient engagement that I've observed at FARA in Friedreich's ataxia are the companies with their patient engagement representatives who come out and they stand on the corner with their coffee and direct bike riders which way to go. Or they take us out to dinner and just have a regular conversation. And it's a lot more than just developing treatments, right? It's building friendships so that when the time comes that we need to take care of business and develop treatments, that is a lot more productive if we're already connected.
And engaged and have that open dialogue. And, one of the things that we do is we'll go to walks when we could have walks prior to COVID.
Yeah.
We go early. We set up. We help out. Yeah, right. We talk to the patients because most of these events are put on by patients, right? And so, we're there and we want to help out and roll up our sleeves and do what we can. And so those are the conversations that need to happen when you're, setting up a table and you're putting chairs up and just having that, relaxed conversation. And those are incredibly meaningful. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, you're not sitting down with someone and being like, so tell me your diagnostic journey. You're just saying like, hey, it's cold out here. Or, whatever. Like, these cookies are good.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, and you go, back on the rare disease kind of journey, my son actually got really sick in December of 2020. And it was really challenging. But he was diagnosed with Crohn's. It's not a rare disease by any means, but we had tools and resources available to us. And thank you to the warriors that went down that path, because he, long journey, December to March, he ended up having 2 surgeries. It was pretty serious, about 11 inches taken from his lower intestines, the whole thing. His doctor said about the worst case that could have happened. it happened. And, but I'm so thankful because I can be thankful. He walked out of that circumstance on a treatment, and, kudos to those that walked before us. Right.
Yeah.
And that we are in that situation. So I'm incredibly blessed and thankful because there are tools, resources, and therapies that probably weren't there.
It's kind of neat to hear you express your gratitude for the warriors before, because when you think about it, Crohn's, sure, fairly common today. Wasn't always that way. Think back
Right.
40, 50, 100 years, it was rare, or it was unique.
Not heard
to an
of.
extent. Yeah. And not that we want every disease to be famous for the wrong reason, but to have that group or that doctor or those folks that can actually point you toward a resource, it's kind of the goal with rare disease, right? Getting people in the right spot when that time comes, if it comes.
Right. Absolutely. And a quick shout out to those frontline workers. We worked really hard, got him out of the hospital on Christmas Eve. And the only reason we could get him out was that a nurse had to agree not only to come to our house on Christmas Day, but to come to our house on Christmas Day during a pandemic. Wow. And during lockdown, because that was Christmas time in December of 2020. So we were in total lockdown. And so because he came home with 2 PICC lines and he couldn't have anything, ingest anything, not even water. And so the next day, that nurse came and took time away from his family to come to our house. So I am so grateful. Showed us how to change them every day. And I went, okay, so when's the nurse coming tomorrow? And he said, no. He goes, you're on your own. And I think I turned completely white. Like, you expect me like to do this for him? Thank the Lord, my daughter, who's, studying to be a nurse, she was all over it. Loved it. Absolutely loved every minute of it. So, but thankfully we only had to do that a couple of days. But unfortunately he went back into the hospital and had surgery on New Year's Eve. So wow. it was a challenge.
Yeah. So Amy, I'm going to back up quite a bit to a little bit more of you, if
Sure.
you don't mind. Obviously you talked about your son, but that was just in the last couple of years. What brought you into this rare disease space in the first place?
Well, I knew about rare diseases, but I didn't know about rare diseases as a whole, the rare disease community. So that therein lies the problem. And a lot of people don't know about the rare disease community, right? And I had a conversation with founder Nicole Boyce about, her passion in wanting to start an organization. And I said, well, let me help. What can I do? What can I do to help? And it started from just kind of helping out here and there to being an invested employee. And then that, 10 years later, but, and then finding out, I think what happened when it all clicked is that when we started to learn about the rare disease community and finding out I have 3 siblings with a rare disease, vitiligo, and, understanding that vitiligo and autoimmune and how is that connected? And then it just kind of grew from there about, all right, so now we can find out a little bit more. And then what are these other autoimmune diseases? And then learning about the rare disease community as a whole. It was an eye opener. And then it was more of the kind of the anger. I went through kind of some phases where I was angry, like, why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we talking about the plight and the challenges and the fact that only 5% have, of rare diseases have a treatment and that there's 7,000 rare diseases? Why aren't we, why isn't this everyday conversation for the everyday American, right? So I think that's where that passion grew to huge passion for helping the rare disease community, I think.
The thing that always gets me is when people talk about that rare disease is the largest group of patients when you take all the rare diseases together, and it doesn't get talked about as much, right?
No.
So, yeah.
It needs to be talked about, and it is so infectious when we would go to these events at Global Genes and these patients would come into a room and talk to other rare disease parents or patients. And that would change their lives really that day on feeling a place of home, like they felt at home. And every year they'd come back and it was almost like a reunion for these families and for these patients and these parents. And having that connection is huge. And like I said, these they become family to you. They really do. And that, will never change. But I'm ready to get back back out there. I'm ready to get back together with people. I do remember seeing you at one of the Global Genes events, and I was too afraid to approach you, so I just kind of watched from afar.
That was one thing I kind of wanted to talk about, because Sean and I have experienced Global Genes. What would you say was the magic there? Because I think we could, all three of us, agree that there's some magic with Global Genes and what they have created. And so what would you say if you could put your finger on that?
It was the connections, 100%. Global Genes was and is very good about connecting other people to the rare disease community. And you weren't on that journey alone. Now you had 1, 2, 5, 100 people that you could tap into at any time and feel supported and feel connected. And so I feel like it is that relationship building. The Global Genes team was in those meetings and at those events just as entrenched and just as connected as the patients and as the caregivers and the parents. So it was more of a family. The Global Genes team and the rare disease community was more of a one big family. And so I think that when people would either pick up the phone and call, or when they would go to these events, they felt like they had a connection and that family. So I think it's just those connections that you can't replace. So when you're starting out on that rare disease journey, either as a, patient support group or as a patient, I felt like they catapulted that much farther on their journey, knowing that they could tap into what we call the warriors behind them that have hit those stumbling blocks or made those mistakes, and they were able to learn from those mistakes. And so, those connections are huge.
For me, I think the X factor, especially at the summit, was that it's a party. And it was so much fun. No longer is rare disease a bummer because I have this disease. All of a sudden, I have something that everybody else has, and it's the cool thing now, right? Or at least it's not a super bummer, and you can just go and be a person instead of feeling like you're sticking out like a sore thumb.
Right, absolutely. And one thing that I love to see is the rare disease moms who would go to these events, and they were able to have that connection and that release. And it was more of just, for now, I'm a rare disease warrior, but I'm a mom, and I'm just going to relax a little bit and enjoy the company of other moms out there.
It's surprising to me, or I don't know, maybe not surprising, but pretty special to, at least for us at the last summit we attended, moms and people you wouldn't expect staying up till 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah. And I don't want to forget the rare disease dads out there.
Yeah, they were in their group too. And we'd just, sit on the patio or whatever it was and be up late. And none of us do that outside of that event.
Absolutely.
The parents are taking care of the kids and work and whatever else. And I'm at sleep normally at that time, so
it is hard not to stay up late at those events. And one event we did was for a rare disease called AHUS, and it was for teenagers. And we had about 40 teenagers, and then they brought one caregiver. And oh gosh, it was so much fun. They were running around that hotel having a great time, and just to see those kids connect on a level that they never connected before. And they saw someone who looked like them and went through the same experiences. But at a certain point, our job was done for that evening, and, caregivers took over, but they were having so much fun. We thought, can we leave? Okay, we're going to go up. Should we go upstairs? But they were having just an absolute blast. The kids and the caregivers. And that was an amazing weekend that I will never forget.
Amy, at Global Genes and in the sort of nonprofit sector, we talk about these connections and all the intangible things that are so, so very important. And then you go to Catalyst industry, and I'm not talking specifically, but in general, we have this idea that industry is obviously driven all by profits and money, and so it's a very different set of values that are in each space. And I was just curious to know what that transition was like for you. Was there something that stood out that you could point to as the difference? And I don't know, was there any shift in you personally when you went over to the dark side?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, I was a little bit nervous, coming from the nonprofit side of things. And as you could probably hear, I'm very passionate about, working in this space. So I was a little bit nervous, and, bottom line, it is a business. But, most pharmaceutical companies in the rare disease space, I know, invest back into the patient community and invest back into other rare disease states, because there's still a lot of work to be done. And so they're constantly kind of giving back. What I didn't expect was a small team of industry professionals who have been in this space for 10, 20 years, who were just as dedicated to the patient community and just as passionate and as I am. And that just, it fuels each other in doing everything they can for the patient community. And so I'm a little bit different in my role in the fact that I am on the commercial side of things. And, we have our patient services, right? Our specialty pharmacy, but we have our patient services program. And the programs that they put in place for patients is top notch. And so it's almost like white glove service. And I'm proud of that. And that I wouldn't expect anything else from Catalyst Pharmaceuticals to put something in place like that to help patients. So they're, once they're enrolled, their hand is held and they walk them through the process, and they actually have a patient access liaison that calls them, checks up on them, make sure, everything's okay, answers questions. So that part of, moving over to the industry side surprised me, because I thought, okay, what am I going to get myself into? Who are these people that have been doing this for 20 years? And it was a pleasant surprise. And so, and I don't know if it's always like that, or if I'm very lucky, but I'm in a good place with a good group of people.
I would hope it's like that more often than we think when it comes to small pharma or people focused on rare disease, so to speak. I think, you early on you said, at the end of the day, it's a business, right? Or bottom line, it is a business. And I think about airlines. Pick one, Delta, United, American, whoever, a big one. They're in business to make money just like somebody like Southwest or Alaska. But I feel like the way they go about it is different, meaning the experience is going to be different for the passenger or the traveler. And hands down, I don't care how much money Southwest makes. I'm all about them because you're not a number, right? You're not just somebody filling a seat. They approach their clientele a little bit differently, which I imagine small pharma is doing the same. Yeah, it's just you approach it differently.
You do, especially in rare disease too, because they are your customers, right? And you have to make your customers happy.
Speaking of, and I don't know how much of this is fair for you to speak to, but on the development side, I've spent a couple minutes on Catalyst, seeing the approval they got a couple years ago and what they've been working on. You mentioned LEMS. I don't know how to say it. I'll just stop it.
LEMS is fine. Lambert Eaton myasthenic syndrome, but yeah, LEMS is fine.
So they've got that treatment out there. What else is Catalyst working on? Is there more in the quote-unquote marketplace for them, or, what are they spending their energy on?
Right, exactly.
And by they, I guess I mean you. What are you doing?
What am I doing? So there were some trials going on in other pipelines that, and as we see a lot in rare disease, didn't quite hit their endpoints and didn't kind of cross that finish line, as we say. But Catalyst is actively looking into other indications in rare neuromuscular disease to hopefully, keep the needle moving forward. So they're actively moving forward, trying to find another indication, and as well as LEMS in rare neuromuscular disease. So there's a lot of work to be done, so they're actively looking for sure. Yeah.
So you mentioned two different conditions that Catalyst is working on. And as we said, as we've been talking about, there's 7,000 rare diseases. What would your advice be to a small nonprofit advocacy organization, because you have experience on both sides?
Yep.
So what would your advice be to a small nonprofit that wants to attract the attention of pharma to be able to develop treatments?
I would say pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and call and reach out to, the pharmaceutical space. I've known parents that when their child was diagnosed with a rare disease and they were just out the gate, they were researching any and all pharmaceutical companies that was in remotely the same space as their child's disease. And those sometimes are really successful because you make those connections. And it obviously, they don't they're doing that search because they don't have a pharmaceutical company working on their child's rare disease, but they're getting close, right? So, they researched it, picked up the phone, developed those relationships, to see where they might go. So I would say make those connections. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it may not go anywhere, but it can't hurt to establish that relationship from the get-go.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing. I'm always amazed at a connection I make like 5 years ago. And it comes around and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had that one conversation, because now it's relevant.
Right.
So
right.
Just being open to all of those things. Yeah.
Right.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you don't know where it's going to go and you don't know where it's going to lead and like you said, it might come around. And there's 7,000 rare diseases. So you've got to raise your hand and say, we're here. We want the attention and we want to make this happen. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and make that phone call.
Amy, before you hang up or disappear on us and enjoy your sunny afternoon, can you tell us something you're proud of and where do people find you and connect with Catalyst?
We're really proud of our disease-specific website that we created. And if anyone wants to check it out, it's called lemsaware.com. And also the social media that surrounds it at @BeLemsAware. They can check it out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So, check it out and maybe you might learn something.
Well, Amy, I feel like we could talk to you all day. Your heart shows through, even through Zoom, and we are so glad that you are at the helm for Catalyst and one of the leaders in the rare disease community, even when you go to the dark side. No, we're just glad that you're at the helm, and we're glad you had this conversation with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I really, really look forward to seeing you at the next event that we can get out there and seeing you guys in person. And I will come and say hello this time.
Please do.
We're counting on it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Have a great day.
The difference between nonprofit side and the industry side of drug development is something I think about a lot, and it's nice to be able to have that conversation from somebody who has played a big part on both sides of the equation.
Yep, it's almost mind-blowing to me. 5 years, a bunch of episodes, yet the perspectives are always different. The conversation always has a unique spin or a unique perspective or even just an individual experience. I'm always amazed that there's always a conversation to be had, and I'm grateful that Amy was willing to have that conversation with us today.
Yeah, isn't it amazing that as much work as we put into the show, really it's endless. Because the conversations and the perspectives are always there, as you mentioned.
How many, isn't it like, I don't know, 8 billion people in the world or something like that? So we got a lot of episodes to go.
Yeah. That number is a debate, I think, just because nobody really knows.
It was certainly more than, what did you say, 3 million or something? I don't even remember. Anyway, let's wrap this up with some thank you notes. Kyle, who are you saying thank you to today?
As you know, I've got this big bike trip coming up, and a lot of it is off-road. And so I'm using a different trike than I usually use. And Catrike sent me a Catrike Dumont. And it's got rear suspension, and then it's got elastomers on the front wheels. So it's suspension on the front wheels as well. And so it's going to take out a lot of the bumps along the way. For the trip, I'm super excited, and for the trike, I am so grateful. Thank you, Catrike.
My thank you is going out to an associate at a local Papa Murphy's. You know, Papa Murphy's is a Take and Bake pizza shop, and it's franchised. I have a feeling the individual was an owner, but I could be wrong. Every now and then, I've been trying to eat a little bit healthier, but man, I love pizza.
Yeah.
Like it's a weak spot for me. So I went out and got a Take and Bake pizza from Papa Murphy's the other night. And what was really nice about it was after they made the pizza, I was sitting there waiting for it. The guy walked around out from behind the counter. He placed it on my walker and then walked with me over to the door to hold the door open. And that was just not expected for sure, but obviously just an extra effort on his part because he probably just assumed I needed it, which I always do when it's the door, right? Like a push or even a pull door. There's not an automatic feature. It's always hard when you have a walker and your hands full. So I appreciate him just jumping in and being mindful of those little details.
Yep. Beautiful.
A big thank you again to Amy for being a part of the show today. Thank you for listening. We encourage you to check out our show notes where we've linked a little bit of stuff on Amy and what she's got going on. If you're enjoying this show, please be sure to share this with a friend. Rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app. We look forward to a couple more episodes with you before closing out this season. And until next time, keep living with urgency.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.